Hi, and welcome to the latest IoT Now Quickfire video. I'm delighted to welcome back Nick Earle, CEO of the global IoT cellular connectivity solutions provider Eseye, because I want to hear about some changes in IoT that are directly impacting enterprise users. Nick, good to see you again.
Great to see you again, Jeremy.
Thanks. If enterprises take control of their IoT by using eSIM, what impact is this going to have on mobile network operators?
Well, a very significant impact. And, in order to explain that, we've just got to recap what does taking control via eSIM mean. So eSIM essentially breaks the proprietary lock that we've had for over 40 years between the MNO and the SIM card. They've all 800 MNOs, all have a proprietary SIM card. They control the connection and they control the switch, which determines who they can roam onto. With eSIM, the SIM becomes agnostic, and the user actually takes control, and the switching platform gets abstracted away from the MNOs, and increasingly is being controlled by the enterprise. And the enterprise says, I'm going to set the rules as to how the connection shifts. And so that's what's happening. And devices will flip between MNOs. And what that means is MNOs must move up the stack. They must move up the stack in two ways. They've got to sell higher value services because they can't rely on the proprietary hook. And secondly, it means they themselves have to become agnostic. They actually have to have a platform which allows them to bring in multiple MNOs into their single platform solution. Just a quick example to make it real. At Eseye, we've white labeled our platform to TELUS, the Canadian operator. TELUS can now offer true global connectivity from TELUS, their roaming agreements, and people, for instance, like Verizon. They can actually offer connections across many, many more MNOs through a single platform. And as a result of which they can bid on global deployments, even though they are essentially a small Canadian operator. So this is what Gartner call composable services, and it means the MNOs have to move up the stack.
You're quoted as saying that the IoT market is going to split three ways in 2022. Can you explain this market split that you envisage and the repercussions?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, essentially the game, so to speak, the control is moving to the enterprise. And that has significant disruptive consequences. Essentially, the market is already bifurcating into low-end volume players who principally compete based on low data pricing. Once is a good example of that. And they're selling to small and medium companies. They're not huge global rollouts, not large enterprise single platform solutions. And at the high end, you've got people who are having to meet the large enterprise value requirements. Now, that is more than just connectivity. So let's take, for instance, security. In a world where the devices can move between MNOs, the IP addresses of the devices change all the time. And so you've actually got to have an MPLS network capability to reach out and actually impose security policy centrally on edge devices via IP network. And very, very few MVNOs have actually got their own core MPLS network for every connection. And that's just one example of what you'll have to sell to large enterprises. So it's much more than connectivity, it's enterprise capabilities. And the question then becomes, how many of today's MVNOs and the platform providers have true enterprise capabilities? How many of them really understand networking? Can you do deep packet inspection of any device, regardless of which MNO it's connected to? My view is that a lot of them won't be able to do it. So you'll have people who will go to the low end, and they'll be very good at that. Most people will say, no, I'm going to go to the high end, but only a few people can go to the high end because of the reasons that I said, which leaves people in the middle. And I think you'll see consolidation. Unfortunately, people will go out of business. But we see it not as a bifurcation, but as a trifurcation, because most people will want to go up. But that's much more than just saying, I'm going to sell to large companies.
Yeah. we're already seeing greater use of 5G. And now Amazon says it can enable any of us to set up a 5G private network just as easily as setting up our own home Wi-Fi. Do you think this is going to be the year that 5G finally becomes real with private LTE and 5G?
I think I think it is, yeah. And of course, Amazon offering it is just one of the examples of what's going to happen. But there are multiple large corporations have bought 5G spectrum. Frankly, every factory will run a 5G network to control everything. And even what you mentioned, Wi-Fi, what today is connected to Wi-Fi will in the future be connected to 5G, either private or public 5G in the enterprise. So as an example of, and so we do believe it is the year it's going to happen. But if I link it back to what I said, the problems we just described about in this interview actually then suddenly get a lot worse because you've got many, many more things now on many, many different networks. So you've got to have a platform that connects not only to public MNOs, but to private LTE operators. So well, we've just announced a very big deal with the world's largest agentless security company, Armis, which actually extends security to the edge device. That encompasses both 5G as well as MNO, public networks. And you do need to have security policy extend to these private 5G networks. And so again, what you start to see is 5G will become real, but actually the only thing that then becomes common in this world where everything is fragmenting and now we've got public and private, you have to implement a policy, configuration, compliance, security at the only one thing that's common to everything in this fragmented landscape, and that's the network. So I do believe 5G will take off, and I believe those that have network capabilities, we call it network level orchestration, will be the winners. And we think that NLO, or network level orchestration, will be one of the things that enables finally the growth of 5G.
Finally, I'd like to talk about one particular industry vertical, just to drill down into this a bit. What changes do you think we can expect to see in connected healthcare in the coming months? I'm thinking particularly of real-time patient monitoring. Is that going to become the norm for clinicians?
I think it will become more popular. These things always take a long time, particularly in healthcare, but essentially with COVID and the need to empty the hospital beds to put COVID patients in, and the fact that you can't get a doctor's appointment, what you're going to see is a shift to where medical grade devices are in the home. So I'm not talking about the Apple Watch here, which gets configured to your iPhone. The patients who need remote patient monitoring are not the sort of people who know how to configure an iPhone to an Apple Watch. They could be in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatsoever. So we're starting to see companies like telehealth introduce cellular connected pulse oximeters, blood pressure devices. So medical grade devices that are cellular, that actually connect the clinician to the patient, as opposed to what we're seeing right now, which is consumer devices which connect the smartwatch to an AI engine and give them advice. So yes, I do believe that will happen. We're already seeing it already, and you'll start to see hospitals and GPs change their business models, where it's not just remote telephone and video, but actually medical devices more and more come into the home. So when you go into hospital, you'll check out with a box of devices, and you will take them home and they'll just connect automatically. That's already happening in the US with telehealth. And we expect to see hundreds of thousands of millions of those devices roll out in the next couple of years as the model for healthcare in general moves to a combination of the center plus the edge, i.e. the patient in the home.
That's a really positive change and a good way to end, Nick. That has been so helpful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I've been Jeremy Cowan of IoT Now, talking to Nick Earle of Eseye. Until the next time, bye for now.